స్టార్ట్ అయిందా మీకు?
भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। 20 मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो। सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर है, सबकी आत्मा आनंद का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा शक्ति का सागर है। सागर है, सागर है। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। 20 मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो।
Jai Gurudev. Swagatam. Welcome to our weekly Maharishi Gita Satsang on chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. We will begin now with Shanti Path. Mukesh ji, Sahana Bhavatu, please.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Shahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejashvina Vadetamastu Ma Virdishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Mala, please. Mukesh ji.
Jai Gurudev.
17 and 18 words पढ़ना।
17 और 18 दीदी।
हाँ, 17 और 18।
जी दीदी। ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। कर्मणो यपि बोद्धव्यं बोद्धव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोद्धव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्मण्या कर्मय पश्येत् कर्मणि च कर्मयः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स मुक्तः कृष्णमकर्मकृत ओम।
Jai Gurudev. First, I will recap the last session's shlokas, and then we will study shlokas on Yagyas, beginning with number 24 to 33. So, in the last session, we have concluded the science of action, and we learned about how enlightened man does not incur sin by engaging in right action. And so that knowledge is very useful for us, because by engaging in right action, we will not be committing sin, number one. And number two, we will be rising in higher states of consciousness. So we have learned that when a wise man, Pandita it's called in Sanskrita, an enlightened man engages in action, he experiences himself as separate from activity. We went through that point many times. When we transcend, then we experience self as separate from activity. And then he experiences Atma. And that is the experience of Atma Jnana, knowledge of Atma. And this Atma Jnana, this knowledge, is compared to blazing fire, which burns up all action. Means action is completely set free from the binding influence of action, because it is separate. It cannot do anything. It cannot make any impression, because you're transcending and you're separate from activity. So action cannot have any effect on that silence. And so that is the important point to remember. And we went through that many times. And we will go through that many more times, because that is the key point in transcending. And in such a state, every undertaking is free from desire. How does that happen? That happens because every thought starts from the deepest level of consciousness. It's called para in Sanskrit. Para means the transcendental level. Then the thought becomes transformed into action without expressing itself as a desire. This happens when we experience self as separate from activity. So that happens in advanced stage, in highly evolved people, in enlightened people. And so there is no kama sankalpa, the motive, the desire is not there. Even before it goes through the stages of desire, it comes onto the surface. So that's how the desire step is completely eliminated. And therefore, there is no binding influence of the action. So, as I said, the wise man is called Pandita. And he's not attached to the fruit of action, nor does he depend on the fruit of action. That's because he's in bliss consciousness. He's content. Why do people have desires? Because they want something. There is some lack. And for an enlightened man, there is no lack. There is no need for anything. So he's self-sufficient. They don't depend on anything outside or anybody outside for their happiness. So because they are full content, there is no desire anymore. And not only that, there is no incentive of desire also. And how does that happen? Usually, senses come in contact with objects, and this results in experience. This experience makes an impression on the mind. And this new impression resonates with the old impression that we already had in the past. And this gives rise to a thought. And this thought, gaining sympathy of the senses, creates a desire because it had been there before. It's coming back onto the surface. And this stimulates senses to action. If you ate mango in the past, when the time comes, then the desire to eat mango will come back up on the surface again. But with transcending, we are breaking this cycle of action, impression, desire, action. Then actions do not produce impressions. And so no new desires are there. And this will help not to incur sin, because some people have some desires, not very healthy desires, and in order to fulfill them, they may commit sin. So this is how we get relief from committing sins. But this doesn't mean that if you ate a mango in the past, you may not have the desire to eat mango in the present. That's not the way it works. Even though you ate mango in the past, when you are enlightened, when you have the thought to eat a mango, you will eat a mango, but it will not create an impression. So it will not create any future desires. So the desire may be there, but it will not create any impression. So that is the biggest advantage of this state of consciousness, where the thoughts turn into actions without bypassing the desire. So the impressions are not there. That is what is concerning, because the more impressions you have, the more actions you will commit, more impressions, more action. So this cycle goes on and on and on. And, only when you break it with transcending, this cycle is broken, and the thoughts and desires will not make impressions. So this is an important point to understand. That's why I spent some time on this. And this kind of person, enlightened man, is a karma yogi. And we all have studied what karma yoga is. Karma yogi is one who is outwardly engaged in action, but inwardly he is engaged in silence. This is a very important definition of karma yoga. And then we studied the qualities of an enlightened man, that is Sthita Prajna, one whose intellect is established. So I will quickly enumerate these qualities. One, enlightened man, Sthita Prajna, one with steady intellect, he is Nirashi, means one who does not expect anything from anyone because he's content, he's happy. He's happy with what he has, period. Second point is Yata Chittatma. That means his heart and mind are disciplined, and senses are under his control spontaneously, without him trying to control the senses. So the third point is that he's one who relinquished all possessions. This does not mean that you give away all your material possession. It has a deeper meaning, and that is relinquishing everything in the relative, including the gunas, and everything other than oneself. And this happens when you transcend You are absorbed completely in silence of Atma, and you have nothing to do with the relative. You have nothing to do with the gunas. So you have relinquished, you have given up, you have gone beyond all the gunas and everything other than yourself. So that is the meaning of relinquishing everything. And then, even though he performs actions by the body, his mind is fixed in absolute purity of Atma. So he is out of the field of ignorance. And so when you're out of the field of ignorance, you are out of the field of sin, because Atma is pure. So there is no chance for any mistake to be committed and to commit any sin, because sin comes under impurity, and you go beyond that. And because you are established in purity of Atma, you get release from the field of sin. So the next quality of enlightened man, he is yadrishta labha santushto. He is satisfied with whatever comes unasked. His actions, being free from desire, serve only the need of the time. He has no selfish interests. He is engaged in fulfilling cosmic purpose. And so he gets nature support. He doesn't worry anything about his needs. He is the instrument of the divine. So, as the instrument of divine, if a divine thought comes to him, he will do that. And he gets nature support for that. And he's happy with whatever divine incentive, prerana, it's called prerana in Sanskrita. So when he gets a prerana that he should teach TM in a school, and then he will follow up on that, he will get nature support, and then that is the need of the time. So he will carry that out. So he's happy with whatever comes to him and unasked. If $1 million come, if he inherits $1 million, or if he inherits $1 million in a lottery or something, he's happy with that. If he doesn't get it, he's still happy with that. If there is no prize in the lottery, he's still happy. He is not happy that, oh, I wish I got $1 million. Then I can spend it on something like teaching TM in a school or something like that. So he's just happy with whatever comes his way. So that's another quality of Sthita Prajna. The next point, the quality is he's beyond duality. And so that's because he's established in unity. Duality means the pairs of opposites, like success and failure, and happiness and sorrow, things like that. They go hand in hand. But he's beyond that. He's beyond duality. And so he's always balanced. Even though he is facing the challenges of the pairs of opposites. So with all these above qualities, he's not bound even while acting, because he is established in the state of non-attachment. And it's very important to remember that the state of non-attachment is not a dry state. It is a state of fulfillment. A person who is established in non-attachment is a content and fulfilled man. So it shows that when one is established in transcendental consciousness, and when his mind is fully infused with being, he is liberated from action and freed from attachment. So in this state, every action is for the sake of yagya. Yagya, we have learned that yagya is something that promotes evolution. So every action becomes a yajna because every action of a person that is enlightened and established in unity is action for the sake of yajna. It promotes evolution. And of course, we will talk about it later. Even in unity, there is room to grow, to go into Brahman consciousness. So that's a bigger topic. We will get into it later. But for now, it is enough to say that every action of an enlightened man is for the sake of yajna. So this takes us to the next section of the 4th chapter of Yagyas. It begins with verse number 24 and goes on for about 9 or 10 shlokas. We will be able to cover all of them because some of them are brief. And then we will have the understanding of yajna. So we will begin with verse number 24. Mukesh ji, first Mukesh ji will do in Sanskrita 1, then I will do in Sanskrita and read English translation, and then Anita ji will read and make main points. Okay. Mukesh ji, एक बार 24th verse. 24th को क्या बोलते हैं?
24 दीदी।
24 नंबर एक बार पढ़ना।
ओम ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविर् ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना। ओम
ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविः ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतम् ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यम् ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना। Brahman is the act of offering. Brahman, the oblation poured by Brahman, into fire that is Brahman. To Brahman alone must he go, who is fixed in Brahman through action. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. This verse does not teach that during the performance of the ritualistic yagya or any other type of action, one should hold in the mind the idea that everything is Brahman. The teaching here concerns far deeper levels of life than the surface level of thinking and making moods. In the preceding verse, it was said, who acts for the sake of yagya, his action is entirely dissolved. These words are further explained in the present verse, which considers different aspects of action performed by the enlightened man. It speaks of all that of consciousness, which realizes oneness of existence in all the diversity of action. In this verse, and those following, the Shri Krishna Bhagavan enumerates different aspects of the action of yagya and says that all aspects are Brahman. Certainly, offering is offering, oblation is oblation, fire is fire, and the performer is the performer. On the level of the relative life, duality prevails. Everything is Brahman only on the level of consciousness of the performer who is established in cosmic consciousness. What has been said in verse 19 to 23 leads to the conclusion that the enlightened man, established in bliss consciousness at all times, irrespective of the engagement of the mind and the senses in action, is intent on Brahman, while at the same time everything that action entails proceeds naturally at the level of the senses through the agency of the gunas. When the mind becomes infused with being, then no thought, word, or act can take the mind out of being. This is the state of cosmic consciousness. The purpose of the present verse is to describe clearly the relationship of action to cosmic consciousness, in which all actions form an integral part of the consciousness and are therefore appreciated as none other than consciousness, none other than Brahman. The verse also implies that the fixity in Brahman constitutes mastery over action and is at the same time the fulfillment of action. Shri Krishna Bhagavan speaks of Yagya in order to explain that the different parts of an action and the various modes of their performance do not leave any trace of bondage for the enlightened man, ever established in the state of pure consciousness or eternal being. He is simply a silent and innocent witness of what is happening through him. He is a means through which nature fulfills its purpose of evolution. His actions are a response to the needs of the time. Quite naturally, he performs action which result in every kind of good. To Brahman alone must he go. Brahman is the reality which embraces both the relative and absolute fields of life. Having gained the state of Brahman, a man has risen to the ultimate reality of existence. In this state of enlightenment, he has accomplished external liberation, and once a man has risen to this state, there is no falling away from it. This is why Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, to Brahman alone must he go who is fixed in Brahman through action. The expression must he go does not mean that on leaving the body he departs to some other place. The word go here finds its meaning in the fact that with the destruction of the body, the realized man is no longer found as an individual, and when someone is not to be found, he is said to have gone. Where then has he gone? In order to explain his position in terms of going, it must be said that he has gone to Brahman. But in fact, there is no question of going for him who is already fixed in Brahman, who has risen to the omnipresent reality. He remains what he was, Brahman, but without the individual body. Who is fixed in Brahman through action? One rises to the state of Brahman in cosmic consciousness, where no activity, however vigorous, can take one out of being. This state of fixity in Brahman is reached by the performance of activity after gaining the state of being through the activity of meditation. The inward activity of meditation followed by the outward activity of the daily life. Thus, it is clear that it is through action that one is fixed in Brahman, and this verse therefore not only describes the state of Brahman, but also shows a direct way to realization. Jai Gurudev. So, in this verse, there are Very nice, beautiful points. And some of the points, Hemaji has already touched upon them. And in little introduction, I could say, for those people who are completely absorbed in God consciousness, the oblation is Brahman. The ladder for using the offering is also Brahman. The act of offering is also Brahman, because then all the instruments of sacrificial fire is Brahman. Why it is Brahman? Because he himself is established in Brahman. So every action that he does in order to perform the yajna, it is a Brahman act, because he is a pure. The person who is performing the yajna is performing from the establishment of pure consciousness. So he sees everything not in duality, but in unity. So all the offerings that he makes comes to him as Brahman. So this is the main thing that I get it. And very beautiful, it says that you are fixed in Brahman. So it's the same thing, because you are established in that. So another point which I think Himaji has already explained, that when we leave the body, it's only the body which goes. The Atma is there, because your Atma has got that fixity that only the body in the Panch Tattva in this goes away. Now, why you remain there? Because that is your absolute self. And your absolute self that has been developed over the time, because your activities has been done. You have been infused with that quality of being. So what happens then? Then through the action that you do in your life, you have been fixed in Brahman yourself. So now this is also one of the points. And the way to realization, you reach that stage, is towards the inward activity, and that is of the meditation, and followed by the outward activity of the daily life. Thank you, Jai Gurudev. Hemaji will continue to explain more. I will go through the scientific research. And in the scientific research, it would be that when you reach to that level of Brahman, then alone you must be in that position, in that action where you have increased self development. Why? Because now we are moving toward higher states of consciousness. And what happens when we move towards higher states of consciousness? We find increased integration of the brain functioning. We find frequent experiences that we in ourselves feel that we are going now to the higher and higher level, because there is increased self-sufficiency and resourcefulness in us. And how that is within us is through transcendental meditation. And this is how we have greater self-control in ourselves. Jai Gurudev.
Okay. Nice explanation, Anita ji. Any questions? One point I would like to add is that I think we talked about it before. Before taking meals, we say a grace. In West, they say grace. In India, we say a little prayer before we take our meals. And sometimes some people recite this shloka, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavihi, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. That means we are offering everything to Brahman. We are offering our food to Brahman, and then we take it as prasad from God. So it's a nice habit. It's created a very nice, peaceful, happy, pure feeling in us. And what it means is we are offering to Brahman, and then we are taking that food. So if you read this shloka every day for 40 days, you'll get it by heart. And then you can say it before your meals every day. It's a very nice habit. And when I say it, when I have guests, they really like it. They feel like, oh, it's very nice, and they want me to write it down, and they want to learn it too. So it's a good habit. So any questions? We can have questions or main points or any appealing points anybody has. Please go ahead.
Jai Gurudev, Hemati.
Jai Gurudev.
It just seems to me, Hema, that it's all a matter of degrees of consciousness and matter. How many, what's the degree of consciousness in one's physiology?
Exactly.
And I just want to say my experience when we do, because it seems so puzzling for all of us that we're still in a human body, but we were speaking about the body being made of the three gunas, or the avatars. You were saying something else from what I understand. And when I'm thinking now of all the technologies that Maharishi has brought out, especially Maharishi Vedic vibration treatment, there've been some very physical things with me. And just by virtue of the darling little Indian lady chanting these little mantras and then blowing air on me, these physical things disappeared. So it's convinced me completely that it's so illusory, that the body is solid, and it's the degree to which Maharishi's knowledge can penetrate in that way. It's such a miracle, really.
It is.
Thank you.
So it is that degree of infusion of being. So when we transcend, we are experiencing the divinity of Atma. And when we come out, we are bringing that divinity into the activity. We are bringing it out into our mind, intellect, senses, every fiber of your body. So all your body is becoming divine. And so that is the glory of karma yoga. People sometimes don't understand. They forget the part of yoga and they just think about karma. And they keep telling, oh, we are doing karma yoga because they are doing some service, because they are only doing karma. If you don't transcend and experience Atma and bring the divinity of Atma into activity, then you are missing out on that yoga part. So with karma yoga, what happens? You are bringing that divinity of Atma into yourself, and then you are performing action. So through your actions, you are radiating into the environment. That is the glory of karma yoga. Very, very important point to remember. So, and this happens in stages. It doesn't happen overnight. So with each meditation, we are transcending, coming out, acting. So that's where the value of action comes. Nobody can meditate 24 hours a day, and it's not even recommended by anybody. So we meditate, we act. So we alternately, we do that. Good point, Maria. So shall we move on now? We have quite a few verses to cover. So we'll move on to the next shloka. Mukesh ji, 25वां shloka.
जी दीदी। ॐ देवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिना पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञापरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्यति। ॐ
दैवमेवापरे यज्ञम् योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञम् यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति। Some yogis perform yajna merely by worshipping the gods others by offering the yajna itself into the fire that is Brahman. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Worshipping the gods is said to be the performance of yajna. Sri Krishna Bhagavan says that when this worship of the gods is offered to Brahman, such an offering is also performance of yajna. An analysis of how worshipping the gods is offered to Brahman and how the offering to Brahman is the performance of yajna may make this clear. Cosmic consciousness is a state of Brahman since it is transcendental self-consciousness that develops into cosmic consciousness. In order to achieve cosmic consciousness through worshipping, one has to transcend through worshipping. This necessitates entering into the subtle phases of the act of worship. And this is most successfully done in a systematic manner by taking the same or form of the God and experiencing it in its subtler states until the mind transcends the subtlest state and attains transcendental consciousness. Those who are highly emotional, however, may even transcend through an increasing feeling of love for the God during the process of making offerings. Transcending the act of worship is said to be the offering of the worship to Brahman. It has the advantage of receiving the blessings of the God and at the same time of helping to develop cosmic consciousness. By transcending, a worshipper arrives at the ultimate fulfillment of yajna and thereby develops cosmic consciousness, the state where his every action will prove to be yajna. All that concerns him will be helpful to evolution and established in his being. He will fulfill the purpose of life. That is why transcending the field of yajna to arrive at the state of Brahman also ranks as yajna. When a man has gained cosmic consciousness, all his actions assume the status of yajna. Because such action is performed in the state of Brahman, it is already on the level of Brahman. This is offering the yajna itself into the fire that is Brahman. Jai Gurudev.
Okay, so with the last verse, that is verse number 24, Brahmarpanam verse, we have begun the section on yajnas. So the first yajna we talked about already, and in the subsequent shlokas, many different types of yajnas are described. So in this verse, it is described how some yogis perform yajna by worshipping the gods with small g. And some other yogis perform yajna by offering yajna itself into the fire that is Brahman. That means when one reaches cosmic consciousness, all his actions have the state of yajna that we just talked about it. Because such action is already on the level of Brahman. They're already established in that state. And this is offering the yajna itself into the fire that is Brahman. And the scientific research on this shloka shows that with regular practice of transcendental meditation, there is increased respect for traditional values. So all these yajnas and rituals, they are considered to be traditional, and sometimes people shy away from them because they don't understand the significance of it. But with regular practice of transcendental meditation, they develop more and more respect for these traditional values. So that's a good sign. That's a good, indication that the individuals with the TM are progressing. So what I would like to do is cover all these 8-9 shlokas on yajna and take the questions all at one time. And so now we will move on to the next shloka, 26. Mukeshji, 26 shloka, please.
जी दीदी ओम श्रोत्रादीनेन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संयमाग्निषुजुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्या इन्द्रियाग्निषुजुह्वति ओम
Shrotraadinindriyananye samyamagnishu juhvati shabdadin vishayananya indriyagnishu juhvati. Some offer hearing and other senses in the fires of control. Some offer sound and other objects of senses in the fires of the senses. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Fires, the plural is to indicate that there are different methods for controlling different senses. There are two types of people: those who keep their senses active, enjoying objects in the world, and those who practice different methods of control. Sri Krishna Bhagavan refers to the second when he says the senses are offered in the fires of control. The word control has been interpreted by most common commentators as implying restraint, and consequently they advocate forcible subjugation of the senses. But it is certainly not possible to put an end to the activities of the senses through the practice of refraining from feeding them. This has already been made clear by Shri Krishna Bhagavan in verse 59 of the second chapter. Therefore, it is obvious that the word control means something other than restraint, something which will indeed have the strength to calm the senses. This is explained in two ways. First, as the proper use of the senses, which is the interpretation given in this verse, and secondly, as the process of allowing all the senses to converge naturally upon one point and to remain there in the state of contentment. This second path is described in the next verse. Some offer sound and other objects of the senses in the fires of the senses. Some people have their sense active in the outside world. This is using the senses rightly for the experience of objects, accepting only those that are forbidden. It is also considered to be the performance of yagya. Thus, the meaning of this verse is clear. Some turn their senses inwards through the practice of transcendental meditation and thus create a situation in which their senses automatically converge to being, thereby naturally fulfilling the very purpose of control. Others do not meditate, but keep their senses controlled by righteous action, by not allowing their senses to experience forbidden things. They too follow the path of Yagya and evolve to reach the Supreme. This is a slow and difficult process. Difficult because the basis of the right action is pure consciousness. Right action without a proper basis is very hard, if not impossible. By transcendental meditation, however, it is easy to gain pure consciousness and thereby automatically to perform right action. Jai Gurudev.
So, this verse tells us how sense control is used to perform the yajna. There are two ways. One way is to turn the senses inward through transcendental meditation. That's what we all are doing. We take the easy path. Maharishi made it very easy for us. And then what happens? The senses converge to being. They all are going towards being, towards the silence of Atma. Because we are going inward, we move in that direction. And this way, senses are automatically controlled. Whereas some others who may not be doing transcendental meditation, they engage in right action. Say, like, they see only right things, they hear only right things, they don't watch much TV, all that violence and all things that are not good for you and all that. So they're trying to do right action, see right things, hear right things, like that. This is also yajna, and there is some value to it. But this is slow and difficult. Difficult because the basis of right action is pure consciousness. When you have pure consciousness, you automatically do right action. So it's becoming easy for us. But if you are doing right action without the experience of pure consciousness, then it becomes hard and it's a slow process. And the scientific research on this one showed improved auditory thresholds and increased visual perception with regular practice of transcendental meditation. So, okay. So now we will move on to the next shloka. Mukesh ji, 27, please.
जी दीदी। ॐ सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ ज्वीयति ज्ञानदीपिते। ॐ
सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते. Others offer all the activities of the senses and of the life breath in the fire of yoga, which is self-controlled, kindled by enlightenment. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. It is generally understood that the practice of self-control is necessary to bring enlightenment. This is clearly contrary to the Krishna Bhagwan's teaching, which states specifically that self-control is a result of the state of enlightenment. During the process of transcendental meditation, when the mind enters the subtler levels of experience, the activity of all the senses decreases and finally stops. The breath also becomes more refined and eventually comes to a standstill. This is the offering of all the activities of the senses and of the life breath in the fire of yoga. Self-control kindled by enlightenment. Self-control means the self remaining within itself without any deviation into the outer world. Control of the mind in its perfect state means the mind remaining within itself without any deviation into the outer world. A lesser degree of control of the mind would be deviation into the outer world in a desired direction. Similarly, control of the senses in its perfect state means the senses remaining in themselves without any deviation into the outer world. A lesser degree of sense control would be deviation into the outer world in a desired direction. Self-control kindled by enlightenment means a perfect state of control of the self, the mind, and the senses. It means that in the state of enlightenment or pure consciousness, in the state of being, the mind and senses are set within themselves without any deviation into the outer world. This takes place in the transcendental state devoid of any activity. When, however, this transcendental state of consciousness becomes permanent and is transformed into cosmic consciousness, then the mind remains anchored to the state of being and entertains activity in the outer world in the desired direction. This is how the mind, even while active, remains within the range of self-control. The senses always follow the pattern of the mind, so when the mind is in this state of self-control, the activity of the senses also remains quite spontaneously within the boundaries of self-control. This means that the senses automatically function in the right direction. This is how, by means of gaining the state of enlightenment, the activities of the senses and of the life breath are offered in the fire of yoga. It is clear, therefore, that the fire of yoga has to be lit first, and only then the control follows. It should be noted that by virtue of this state of self-control on the cosmic level, the activity of the creation and evolution of cosmic life is spontaneously carried out by the nature of the three gunas, while cosmic being, God, remains uninvolved with activity. This is a picture of inner functioning of cosmic life. It shows with what spontaneity and precision, based on self-control, the activity of cosmic life is carried on. Here, yoga has been defined as a state of self-control spontaneously created by enlightenment, by the realization of the self in transcendental consciousness, and therefore in the state of cosmic consciousness as well. God consciousness is the supreme state of enlightenment. As this state is gained, self-control on the level of the individual life rises to self-control on the level of cosmic life. Jai Gurudev.
So, in this verse, the shloka is saying that self-control is the result of enlightenment and not the other way around. Enlightenment is not the result of self-control. This is a very important point for us to understand and to remember. In transcendental meditation, when the mind experiences subtler levels of thought, the activity of the senses decreases and finally it stops. Breath also becomes very refined, and we all have experienced that. And then eventually you'll find that it gradually comes to a standstill. Then you are in a state of yoga, union. The mind has united with Atma. So the fire of yoga is lit first. So that's the important point. So we first go into yoga. Then you offer activities of senses and prana into it. Then self-control automatically follows. So I repeat, self-control is the result of enlightenment, and enlightenment is not the result of self-control. So the scientific research on this shloka, can you show the slide, please, Sunita? So this study shows increased EEG coherence during the time of natural respiratory suspension. And this happens during pure consciousness and samadhi state. This was compared to controls, in which the subjects were voluntarily holding their breath. But in TM, it happens naturally. But the controls, they were trying to hold their breath and, try to stop breathing for whatever length of time. And of course, there was no increase in the EEG coherence with that kind of situation. So now we move on to the next shloka, 28. Mukeshji, 28, please. Are you there, Mukeshji? Oh, he got disconnected. Okay, never mind, I will read it. Dravyajnanastapo yajna yoga yajnastatha pare swadhyaya jnana yajnascha yatayah samshitavrataha. Dravya Yagyas Tapo Yagnya Yoga Yagyas Tatha Pare Swadhyaya Jnana Yagyascha Yataya Samshitavrataha. Some likewise perform yajna by means of material possessions, by austerity, and by the practice of yoga. While other aspirants of rigid vows offer as yajna their scriptural learning and knowledge. Jai Gurudev.
Here, Sri Krishna Bhagwan describes material, bodily, and mental methods of purification for the sake of evolution, for the sake of gaining freedom in cosmic consciousness and its fulfillment in God consciousness. Yagya, by means of material possessions, denotes giving away wealth to the deserving. It also means the performance of Vedic rituals by offering sacrificial rites, pious. To perform yagya by austerity means subjecting the body to heat, cold, and other sufferings for the sake of purification. By the practice of yoga, we have already seen in chapter 2, verse 45-50 and chapter 3, verse 7, offer as yagya their scriptural learning and knowledge, sit and meditate and transcend the field of learning, experience the transcendent being, which is the goal of all learning. Jagadev?
So, the yajnas described in this verse lead to purification of mind and body, like giving away money for a good purpose, doing Vedic rites, and austerity. In austerity, some suffering is involved. They subject themselves to cold and heat and too much fasting, and some extreme actions are performed. But all this suffering leads to purification. It purifies their mind and body. So there is some value to it. But again, we take a easy route, for developing higher states of consciousness. But there are all kinds of people and there are all kinds of yajnas. So it is just to bring it to our attention, the number of yajnas that are available out there. These different yajnas are mentioned here and all have some value. Some are more effective, some are less effective, like that. And scientific research, please, Sunita. So this study also shows increase in EEG coherence after starting TM as compared to their own experience. So before starting learning TM, they all were sitting with their eyes closed and not doing TM because they didn't learn TM yet. And so they measured the EEG. And after they learned TM, they measured EEG again. And it showed increase in EEG coherence. So that's what this study showed. So now we move on to the next shloka. I will read the Sanskrit. Apane juhvati pranam. Apane juhvati pranam. Prane panam tatha pare. Pranapanagati rudhva. Pranayama parayanaha. Apane juhvati pranam. Prane panam tatha pare. Pranapanagati rudhva. Pranayama parayanaha. Others again, who are devoted to breathing exercises, pour the inward into the outward breath and the outward into the inward. Having restrained the course of inhalation and exhalation. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Here, Sri Krishna Bhagavan explains to Arjuna that there is a class of seekers of truth who try to realize through the process of breathing exercises. They induce the inward into the outward breath and the outward into the inward, thus restraining the course of inhalation and exhalation. This results in the suspension of breathing, which brings the mind to stillness in the silence of bliss consciousness, simultaneously culturing the nervous system to maintain the state of consciousness. That is why the practice of breathing exercises is included here as yajna. Transcendental meditation also fulfills the requirements of this verse, for during its practice, the outgoing and ingoing breaths quite spontaneously begin to become more shallow. The flow of the outgoing breath becomes less and the flow of the ingoing breath becomes less. This phenomena of the simultaneous diminution of both has been described as the pouring of one into the other. This is how, through the practice of transcendental meditation, in a very easy manner, one pours the inward into the outward breath and the outward into the inward. Jai Gurudev.
So the main point here is that some try to realize the truth by pranayama, by using the technique of restraining breath and suspension of breathing. They only do pranayama and they don't have the mental technique like transcendental meditation like we do. They solely depend on pranayama to rise to higher states of consciousness. This has some value to it also, because this brings the mind to stillness in the silence of Atma. This can be a bit rigorous if they are not doing transcendental meditation. But fortunately for us, again, we don't have to go through all this rigorous process of pouring the breath into other breath and all that. We all have experienced that when we go deep in transcendental meditation, our breathing is very shallow. It's like almost it's not there. You are hardly breathing. And This is described as pouring of outward into inward and inward into the outward. Now, Sunita, please show the scientific research. So this research study shows that there is a decreased respiration rate during transcendental meditation as compared to the people who are just sitting with eyes closed. Their respiratory rate is not decreasing, it just remains the same. But with the TM, there is decrease in the respiratory rate. So now, Sunita, we go back to the reading 30th shloka, please. Apare niyatahara pranan praneshu juhvati sarvepyete yajnavido yajnakshayita kalmashaha. Apare niyatahara pranan praneshu juhvati sarvepyete yajnavido yajnakshayita kalmashaha. Yet others, restricting their food, offer breaths into breaths. All these are knowers of yajna. And through yajna, their sins are cast away. Jegute?
When a man restricts his food, less oxygen is needed for metabolism, and therefore his breathing becomes more shallow. Restricting their food means not feeding the senses with their objects, not engaging in the activity of action or even thought. This non-engagement in activity requires a reduction in metabolism, which in turn requires reduction of respiratory activity. This, as has been explained in the previous verse, is what Shri Krishna Bhagavan means by offer breaths into breaths, that is pranayama. All these are different ways of purifying oneself. That is why they are called yagya. Through their practice, sins are cast away. The Brahma-bindu Upanishad declares that a huge mountain of sins extended for miles is destroyed by union brought about through the transcendental meditation, without which there is no way out. Chegudev.
So, the type of yajna described here is restricting food. So there are two ways of doing. One is restricting food, not feeding the senses on the surface level, you're eating less. And also, you are not providing the senses with their objects, like stomach wants to eat, so you're not providing that. So you're not feeding the senses with their objects. And all this results in decrease in breathing. And such acts are purifying. Fasting and all that, they are purifying. So there is some value to it. So this is also a yajna. And because it is purifying, there is some value to it, and that because of purification, the sins are cast away. So we are releasing stress and sins are going away and we are getting purified. And there is a beautiful quote in Dhyana Bindu Upanishad. It says, Yadi Shaila Samam Papam Vistirnam Bahuyojanam Vidyate Dhyana Yogena Nanyo Bheda Kadachana. It means a huge mountain of sins extending for miles is destroyed by union brought about by transcendental meditation, without which there is no other way. So now scientific research, please, Sunita. So this study shows that with TM, there is decrease in respiratory rate, metabolic rate, and decreased use of oxygen as compared with the controls. In earlier studies, we have noted that there is a great decrease in the metabolic rate during the practice of transcendental meditation. So this is a kind of repeat of similar studies that were done in the past. So with this shloka number 30, the section on yajna starting from 24 to 30 is concluded. And we have a couple more to cover. We'll go ahead and cover those. We move on to the 31 shloka, Sunita. Yagnashishtam Rutabhujo Yanti Brahma Sanatanam Nayam Lokostya Yajñascha Kutonya Kurusattama Yagnashishtam Rutabhujo Yanti Brahma Sanatanam Nanyam Lokostya Yajñascha Kutonya Kurusattama. Eating the remains of the yajna which is nectar. They reach this eternal Brahman. This world, O best of Kurus, is not for him who offers no yajna, much less the world hereafter. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Having described the various types of yajna in the previous verses 24 to 30, Sri Krishna Bhagavan in this verse explains their result. Yajna is a process of purification. Every such process leaves the mind finer and thus more capable of transcending. When yajna is over, the mind is purified and gains a higher level of consciousness. This eventually results in bliss consciousness, which Sri Krishna Bhagavan calls nectar. The bliss remains as it were when the yajna is over. Those who enjoy this bliss, says Krishna Bhagwan, reach the eternal Brahman, because it is this transcendental bliss consciousness that, through continued practice, develops into cosmic consciousness and eventually into God consciousness. Sri Krishna Bhagavan says further that if man does not yajna, he will be successful neither in this world nor hereafter. Unless the arrow is fully drawn back on the bow, it does not gain sufficient energy to shoot forward with great force. Unless the mind is drawn inwards and brought to the extreme limit of its inward march, it does not become dynamic. And unless the mind becomes active and powerful, it certainly will not achieve success in the world. Sri Krishna Bhagavan shows that the process of purification or yajna is necessary both for success in this world and to gain strength for success in the world hereafter. Of all the yajnas, the yajna of transcendental meditation is the most effective, for it is a direct means of bringing the mind to absolute purity and enabling it to contact the source of limitless life energy and intelligence. Jai Gurudev.
So now that we have studied about all the yajna, the result of the yajna is explained here. Yajna is a process of purification. And so after yajna, the mind and body are more pure. When yajna is over, one reaches higher level of bliss consciousness. And Krishna Bhagavan calls this as nectar and says that those who experience this reach Brahman. So, when we are resting after our program, we have that good feeling. I'm sure every one of you have that. That is what is called as nectar. The nectar is flowing through your entire body in all tissues, organs, limbs, everywhere. So that is the nectar we experience at the end of the program when we rest. That's why that 2-minute rest after meditation for meditators is very important. For siddhas and governors, when they do flying, yogic flying, the instruction is to rest at least 10 minutes and longer if it is needed. That is just as important as doing your program. Sometimes people do not realize the value of the rest after program, and they are losing the benefit of resting and experiencing this nectar. It really is so delicious. Once you realize the value of it, you will never get out of meditation and run, which some people do. It's not at all recommended. So the rest after meditation is extremely important. So Krishna Bhagavan says that if one is not performing this yajna of experiencing nectar after meditation, he will not be successful neither in this world nor hereafter. So Sunita, scientific research, please, no time for that. I'll just read it. This study was conducted in a California prison where TM was taught. And it showed lower rate of return to prison. Very significant point here. Okay, go ahead and show it. It also showed that the prisoners were not breaking rules as much, and parole violation decreased, and there was greater sense of social responsibility and decreased crime. So we will stop here and let's have some discussion on all different types of yajnas. So any questions, please go ahead. Comments or experiences or appealing points?
Okay, Gurudev, Hema.
Yes, Maria, go ahead.
Thank you. I just am fascinated by the word remains of the yagya, because
Yeah.
normally the remains are the leftovers of anything. But in this case, the remains are the reward. It's just like Maharishi says to us that we do our program and we get the bliss from that. And as a byproduct, we get world peace.
Right.
You know, so just what you're saying, that emphasis on rest is so significant, because we're always focusing on what we need to do, but actually the rest actually brings that to fruition. And the word remain also is a play on words, I find, because it is the absolute. The absolute is the only thing that remains.
Right. Very good point. What remains is absolute. And absolute is bliss consciousness. So that's what we want. So we want to get to that state. So that's why rest is so important. Very good. Any other points?
Hemaji, we always found that when we rested after Dhyan, we all went to sleep. All of us went to sleep. And it was such a great problem because I was conducting the TM classes. So after flying, I had to tell them, Utho bhai, let's go. There's a breakfast is waiting for you, because, when you're in such time consuming programs, the breakfast will be over and run from there. And it used to be fun, and we used to laugh so much. Nobody wanted to get up. Everybody was lying flat on the lovely mattresses that we had.
Yeah.
So that was also a great experience. We loved that.
Yeah. And you know why people fall asleep during meditation or after meditation in the rest? Because their bodies are not getting enough rest. People stay up in the night. They have to get up in the morning with alarm. They have to run to work and so many things to do. So when they relax in meditation, they just fall asleep. And that sleep sometimes is so deep and so resting and so beautiful experience.
No, thereafter, Hemaji, very energetic too, because we have a very tight schedule in Bhopal. So it was very energetic too. We had
Yeah.
to run from class to class and this and that. It was, energetic and full of fun also, let me tell you.
Yes. Yes. Lot of fun. Okay. Any other points? So we covered a lot today. We didn't have enough time for Vedic recitation. The Pandit is also not there. So what we will do today is we will take a shortcut. Maharishi said that when you recite the first and last shlokas, you get the benefit of the entire chapter. So that's what I will do now. Shri Bhagavanuvacha imam vivasvate yogam प्रोक्तवानहमव्ययम् विवस्वान् मनवेत्राः मनुरिक्ष्वाकवे ब्रवीत् तस्मादज्ञानसम्भूतम् हृत्स्थं ज्ञानासिनात्मनः चित्वैनं संशयं योगम् आतिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे ज्ञानकर्मसन्न्यासयोगो नाम चतुर्थोऽध्यायः। Krishnarpanamastu. Oh, I just noticed Ram Narayana is here. Do you want to make any comments, Ram Narayana?
Jai Gurudev, beautiful,
Okay.
beautiful.
Very good day.
I heard it, beautiful, very nice. And the role of rest, as you said, is really very, very important.
Yeah.
Role of rest after meditation is
Yeah.
really very, very much important, very much important. Whatever you have said is really 100% true.
Yeah.
100%
That's what
true.
we try to do.
Rest is most important, and as she was saying that we will not sleep. I don't say, but inner, deeply at some stage there will be some fatigue. So that fatigue will be going out.
Right.
As when we are active more and more, so we don't notice that fatigue which is lying there inside very deep. So that deep fatigue will be going out in the way of sleep. So really that will make us more energetic. The 2 minutes or few more minutes or maybe some 15 minutes or half an hour.
Yeah.
Very beautifully you brought out the point, madam.
Yeah.
Point out, Himaji.
Right.
Very nice, very
Yeah.
nice session.
So we
very
always
nice
try
session,
to
very
correlate the
beautiful.
knowledge Maharishi is giving in this beautiful, Gita shloka. We connect it to our experience, tea and
Yes,
the
yes,
rest, and so many practical things
Mm.
we need to be reminded. So
Thanks.
that's what we
Really,
do. Very, very good.
really, nobody give these subtle answers or subtle things in the sadhana. These are all the beautiful things Maharishi has given out to
Right.
sadhakas. Where else in no other meditations they don't emphasize all these things. They just say just meditate and just that's all. But
Yeah.
these points are very beautiful points, very, very minute points. My to Maharishi, as he is a great guru for all of us in
Right.
this modern at any time.
Yeah.
Anytime. Beautiful. Thank you, madam,
Okay.
for this
So
beautiful
we
thing.
will stop now. I'll say the Shanti part. Sarve
Okay.
bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santu niramaya. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. Ma kaschit dukha bhag bhave. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Jai Gurudev. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Anita ji and Sunita ji, for
Jai Gurudev, Himaji.
reading and
Jai
Jai Gurudev,
Jai
Jai Ramnarayan.
Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Anita ji. Jai Gurudev, Bela. Jai Gurudev to happy. Jai Gurudev, Maria. Nice discussion we had. Nice discussion. So we'll meet again next week, same time. I'll close now. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev.
So I'll end the meeting now. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.